An injured Apache beauty was found by a cowboy, far from any road or homestead. Dust swirled around her torn moccasins as she lay tangled in a rough hunting snare, too weak to stand and too proud to beg. The armed horseman stepped closer, boots crunching over dry cedar needles, while she braced for chains, ropes, and a fate whispered about around campfires. But instead of reaching for iron, he knelt and offered water. What could drive a frontier man to risk his own life by helping someone the world had marked as an enemy? And what price would kindness demand under the law of this land? The snare rope strained against her ankle as she tried to pull free, every movement sending pain shooting up through her leg. A cold breeze whispered across the ravine, shaking dry mesquite branches overhead. The woman pressed her palm against the earth, breathing through clenched teeth, refusing to cry out. Somewhere far off, a lone church bell echoed, carried by the wind like a warning. Hoofbeats, slow, heavy, getting closer. She stiffened, pressing herself upright despite the pain. "Easy there," a calm voice said. The rider stopped several paces away, one hand resting near his holster, not on it. His coat was dusty from long travel, and the brim of his hat shadowed his eyes. "I won't belong to any man," she muttered, jaw tight. "Didn't say you would," he replied. A beat of silence, only wind and the soft groan of the snare wood. He dismounted carefully, turning his palms outward, showing he held no rope, no chain, no restraining tool. "You're hurt. Let me look." She narrowed her eyes. "Help from your kind always has a price. Water first, words later." He set his canteen on a flat stone between them and backed up half a step, as if giving her a choice. She stared at it, unsure whether this was mercy or a trap laid with honey instead of iron. The metallic scent of her own blood mixed with the smell of pine sap, making the world seem unsteady. "What do you want?" she whispered. "Not to leave someone to die alone," he answered softly. He crouched near the snare, studying the mechanism, old, rust-patched, likely set by a trapper who hadn't planned on returning soon. "Bone might be cracked," he murmured. She flinched when he reached slowly toward the knot. "Touch me and I'll fight," she warned. "Then fight after," he said. "Let me free the leg first." For a moment, she saw something in his face. Regret, maybe even fear, but not of her. Of the world that would judge him for this moment. A distant rifle shot echoed from over the ridge. The man froze, his hand still hovering over the snare. "Someone else is out here," he whispered. The cowboy lowered his knees into the dry grass, studying the snare with calm, practiced eyes. The Apache woman held her breath, muscles tight, ready to lunge if he made even one move she didn't trust. A hawk circled overhead, its cries slicing through the cold morning air like a warning omen neither of them could ignore. "Ropes twisted deep," he muttered, fingertips hovering so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "If I pull, it'll tear more flesh." "I'll bear it," she said, though her voice trembled. "Pain is not death." "I know," he answered, "but infection is." She blinked. He spoke like someone who had seen too many graves dug shallow. The cowboy looked over her moccasins, the carefully beaded patterns dulled by dirt and dried blood. Her clothing was torn and smoke-scented, recent fire, recent running, recent loss. She stared straight forward, refusing to let him see that each breath cut like broken stone inside her ribs. He set his rifle aside, sliding it across the ground with the barrel facing away. Then he removed his gloves, placing them in the grass where she could watch every gesture. "You're free to strike me," he said, "but don't move that leg until the snare's loose." "Why help?" she asked. "No one helps without trade." "Maybe I'm tired of burying people," he said. He reached for his saddlebag and pulled out a folded cloth, a small tin of salve, and a hunting knife worn from years of sharpening. He held the blade low and neutral, not a threat, only a tool. She inhaled sharply. "If steel touches me, I won't fear death. I'll take you with me." "Then watch my hands," he whispered, "and judge for yourself." He cut a thin piece of wood from the trap, easing pressure millimeter by millimeter. The woman's jaw tightened, but she forced herself silent. Her people were taught from childhood that the spirit breaks long before the bone if cries are wasted. "You're strong," he said quietly. "I was born that way," she replied. "No," he said. "You earned it." For a split second, something softened, not trust, but recognition of human weight carried too long by both. When the final knot snapped free, blood rushed to her ankle, and she stifled a cry. He slid the cloth beneath her leg so dirt wouldn't grind into the wound. She shivered, not from fear, but from the sudden freedom she had not prepared for. "Drink," he said, tapping the canteen gently. She hesitated, then took it, never looking away from him. She drank slowly, controlled, refusing the appearance of hunger or weakness. "Where were you headed?" he asked. "Nowhere," she said. "No one goes nowhere. Those who lost everything do." He fell silent. That answer required no further explanation. The frontier was full of ghosts who still breathed. A dry branch cracked in the forest, sharp, deliberate. He grabbed his rifle in a single smooth motion, and she instinctively began to crawl backward, gritting through the agony in her leg. "Stay low," he whispered. "Is it hunters?" she asked. "Maybe. Or soldiers? Could be." The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of metal, something tapping lightly against wood, almost rhythmic, like a buckle against a saddle or a loose spur against a boot. The cowboy narrowed his eyes, scanning the shadows. "You know this area?" he asked. She nodded once. "Too many traps. Too many men who want something." "What do they want?" "Land. Stories. Proof." She paused. "Or bodies." He clenched his jaw, understanding immediately. "They come through here often." "Not anymore," she whispered. "They come to take without speaking. They leave without burying." The cowboy glanced at her ankle. "You can't outrun them." "I know." He offered his hand, not grabbing, not demanding. "Come with me. I know a place for shelter. No chains." "No debts?" She stared at his hand as if it were a match near dry tinder, small but capable of burning everything. "And if I refuse?" she asked. "Then I walk away," he said. "But so will anyone with mercy left." Silence. The world seemed to hold its breath. She placed her palm against his, but not to accept. To test if he flinched when touched by someone the law considered less. He didn't. Then she whispered, "I will walk beside you until I no longer need to." He nodded once. He lifted her carefully, but halfway to his horse, a voice echoed through the trees. "Drop her, or be judged by law." A silhouette stepped into view, holding papers sealed with government wax. The cowboy instinctively shifted his body to shield the injured woman, though he did not raise his rifle. The newcomer stepped from between the pines, boots coated in red dust, a leather satchel slung at his side. His posture was calm, not hostile, as if he carried authority instead of gunpowder. "Easy," the cowboy murmured to her. "You're not going back in that trap." "I won't crawl for any law," she whispered. The stranger held up a folded packet of papers, edges frayed, stamped with an official seal darkened by wax and dirt. His voice was steady, not cruel, almost formal. "By order of the Territorial Office," he announced, "all individuals found near disputed hunting grounds are to be questioned and escorted for proper record." The cowboy narrowed his eyes. "That document say anything about injured people?" "It says all, stranger. No exceptions made." The woman gripped the cowboy's sleeve, not seeking comfort, only to ensure he didn't leave her standing alone in front of another decision made without her voice. "That ground was never yours," she said quietly. The official inhaled, not in anger but in patient weariness. "I didn't draw the lines, but I am sent to speak for the men who did." The cowboy angled his stance. "She needs medical tending." "She will receive it," the official replied, "but only after she is signed into record." "Record for what?" the cowboy asked. "For proof of witness," the official said. "There was a fire, several camps lost. No survivors counted yet." The woman's gaze lowered, lashes trembling, though no tear fell. She spoke with a voice that felt carved from bone. "I saw smoke," she whispered. "I heard nothing after." "Then you are a witness," the official said, tone tightening, "and that makes you required." Required, not requested. The cowboy placed himself half a step forward, not aggressive, simply resolute. "She can barely stand. Let her rest." The official studied him carefully, noting every detail, the worn coat, the tired eyes, the quiet steadiness. "You're not her keeper," he said, "and this isn't charity work. A full inquiry stands. If she flees, they'll assume guilt." The cowboy didn't flinch. "Guilt of what?" The official lowered his voice. "Of knowing who lit the first flame." The woman turned away slightly, jaw tightening. The cowboy caught the shift. Not guilt, but memory she wasn't ready to hand over like currency. He spoke softly to her. "You don't owe him more than your truth. No less, no more." The official tapped the documents against his palm. "We ride to the post before nightfall. Candle and pen wait there." "She can't ride," the cowboy said. "She can," the official returned, "if we bind the wound." "Bind," the woman echoed, bitterness threading the word. "Always bind." For the first time, the official's stern facade cracked, not with cruelty, but with a glimpse of conscience. "No harm intended," he said quietly. "But the territory won't wait on storms or sorrow." The cowboy noticed a detail others would miss. The official's boots were worn at the heels, his satchel patched 3 times, and his coat carried the faint smell of tobacco not from habit, but from proximity to crowded rooms and ink-filled nights. A man ordered to enforce rules he likely had no hand in writing. The cowboy rested a hand on his saddle. "What if I accompany her?" he asked. The official paused. That option had not been offered before. "You would swear to present her at the post?" "She won't travel alone." The official considered it, eyes shifting between their faces, distrust, hope, and something heavier than either. "Fine," he said, "but the oath will be written." The woman lifted her chin. "Written by whose words?" "Yours," he answered. "I don't speak for you." That gave her enough strength to breathe more freely. The official stepped forward, unrolling a cloth kit of supplies, bandages, a small jar of tincture, and a bone needle. He did not reach for her. He waited for permission. The cowboy looked to her, letting the choice fall into her hands where it belonged. She extended her legs slowly. "No stitching," she said. "Only wrap." Agreed. He worked with practiced gentleness, not as a captor, but as someone who once tended wounds paid for by decisions made far from fields. When the binding was finished, she tested the pressure, painful but manageable. The cowboy supported her to the horse, lifting carefully, never taking her dignity, only her weight. The official mounted his own horse, but before moving, he issued one final instruction. "No roads," he said. "Too visible. We travel through the old mining cut." The cowboy frowned. "That route hasn't held a bridge in years." "It holds something now," the official replied, "and we don't want eyes on us." "What kind of eyes?" the cowboy asked. The official didn't answer. He simply said, "Ride quietly, and whatever you hear, don't answer it." They rode beneath a sky the color of hammered iron, clouds dragging low as if the weather itself wished not to be seen. The horses' hooves sank quietly into damp soil, muffled by pine needles and old ash. Ravens perched along blackened branches, watching with the stillness of carved figures placed by unseen hands. The injured woman kept her back straight despite the pain. She refused to lean fully against the cowboy's chest, even when the horse shifted sharply on uneven ground. Survival had taught her that leaning, even for comfort, meant giving something someone else could claim. "You hear anything?" the cowboy whispered. "Too quiet," she murmured. "Silence is never empty." The official leading the way tugged his reins gently, slowing his horse until all 3 rode nearly side by side. "We take the cut trail ahead," he said. "No speaking beyond what's needed." "Why?" the cowboy asked. "Sound carries between those ridges. Echoes are answered sometimes." "By who?" The official didn't look back. "People who aren't fond of questions. Or of law." The woman closed her eyes for a moment, sensing the earth beneath them, not mystically, but as someone who had learned to read land the way others read maps. She noticed how the birds refused to fly above the next ravine, choosing instead to circle wide arcs away from it. "Your road is wrong," she said. "It's the only hidden one," the official replied. "Some roads are hidden because they were buried for a reason." The cowboy tilted his head slightly. "We can still change course." "Turning back draws more suspicion than moving forward," the official said. "We do not run. We arrive. The path narrowed into a corridor of rock and charred trunks, the remnants of old mining timbers scattered like bones. On one side, a sheer drop vanished into fog. On the other, jagged stone pressed so close it scraped the saddle leather. The woman whispered, "This is where men used to disappear." The official answered quietly, "Yes." The cowboy exhaled through his teeth. "You led us here knowing that?" "I led us here because the open road guarantees interception," the official replied. "I would rather risk ghosts than rifles." They continued, the only sound the slow grind of hooves over crumbling shale. Halfway through the ravine, the woman lifted her head, her eyes sharpening. "Stop!" Both men froze. "What is it?" the cowboy whispered. She pointed with two fingers, not forward but upward. On the highest ridge, a small object swung from a bent branch, tapping lightly in the wind, like the ticking of a distant pocket watch. A strip of cloth, striped. "Government issue." The official's jaw tightened. "That shouldn't be here," he muttered. "What does it mean?" the cowboy asked. "It means someone got here before us. Someone who wanted us to know." A thunderless rumble echoed far beneath the ground, not natural but metallic, like a wagon axle dragged slowly across rock. The woman whispered, "We're not alone." The official steadied his horse and lowered his voice to barely a breath. "Do not shout. Do not call out. If they answer, it won't be in words." The cowboy reached for the rifle strapped to his saddle. "No," the official hissed. "If you draw steel here, you invite steel back. Keep your hands clear." They resumed forward, slower, more deliberate, breath held like scripture in their lungs. The trail curved to a narrow stone arch where the ravine funneled into a single file passage, one way forward, no room to turn back. "After this bend," the official said, "we'll see an old crossing platform from the mining days." "And after that?" the cowboy asked. The official didn't answer immediately. Finally he said, "We will find out if the records office sent only me or if others wait." The woman spoke with calm certainty. Truth never waits alone. They reached the bend. The official rode through first, ducking beneath the low stone lip. The cowboy followed with the woman, guiding the horse carefully through the bottleneck. Then they saw it, not a crossing platform, not abandoned, but a newly erected checkpoint, a lantern still warm, a ledger open on a crate, and 3 horses tied, saddles bearing military-marked bedrolls. The official's face went pale. "They weren't supposed to be here yet," he whispered. From behind the ledger, a calm voice spoke. "You're late, and you brought a witness we didn't authorize." 3 men stood behind the makeshift table, uniforms dulled by dust, but unmistakable. Brass buttons, worn shoulder straps, small badges sewn by tired hands. Their rifles leaned within easy reach, though none were raised. Not yet. The cowboy tightened his grip on the reins. The Apache woman felt the horse's muscles tense beneath them, catching the animal's unease like a second heartbeat. The officer in the center closed the ledger with deliberate calm. "You were due yesterday," he said to the official. "Alone." The official cleared his throat. "Trail washed out, and I found a witness." "A witness," the officer repeated, eyes sliding to the woman. "Or a stray?" She met his gaze without lowering hers. Her leg throbbed under the bandage, but her spine stayed straight. "I am not lost," she said quietly. "You are simply late to truth." One of the younger soldiers shifted, surprised by her composure. The officer didn't flinch. "The order," he said, holding out his hand. "Let me see it." The official passed over the folded papers. The officer broke the wax and read in silence, lips moving slightly with each line. The wind rustled the edges as if trying to turn the page faster. "Search for survivors," he murmured. "Gather witness statements. Record cause of fire. Return with names." He lowered the page. "It does not mention escorts or cowboys." "She couldn't walk out alone," the official said. "I swore to bring her safe." "Safe to who?" the officer asked. "Her people or ours?" The cowboy spoke up, voice firm. "Safe to anyone who still cares what happened." The officer assessed him with a cool stare. "You involved yourself freely?" "No bounty," the cowboy said. "No promise, just conscience." "Conscience is not written into this order," the officer replied. The younger soldier at the table glanced at the woman's leg. "She's injured, sir." "I can see that," the officer answered. The woman shifted slightly in the saddle. "The fire came before my wound," she said. "Ask about the flames, not my steps." The officer tapped the papers against his palm. "Where were you when they started?" "Downwind," she replied, "smelling my world disappear." "Did you see who lit them?" She paused. "I saw smoke from cabins that were not ours." A shadow crossed the officer's face. "Settler cabins," she held his gaze. "Wood is wood. It all burns the same." "That is not an answer," he said. "It is the only honest one," she replied. The official shifted in his saddle, uneasy. "She can give more once she's rested." The officer handed the order back. "You're no longer in charge here." The air thickened. The cowboy felt it like invisible rope pulling tight around all of them. "What's your intention?" he asked. "The same as the territories be," the officer said. "Keep order. Assign blame. Prevent further burnings." "And if the truth doesn't fit your ledger lines?" the cowboy asked. The officer gave a thin, almost smile. "The truth always fits. If you trim enough edges." The woman's fingers dug into the saddle blanket. "You want names?" she said. "Not answers." "We want someone to stand in front of a crowd," he replied. "Someone the public can point at and say, 'There.' That's why we're afraid." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "So you already chose a suspect?" The officer looked straight at the woman. "The frontier always chooses first. We just write it down." One of the other soldiers whispered, "Sir." The officer raised a hand. "Ease yourself, Corporal. No one's hanging from a tree today." He turned back to the woman. "You will ride with us to the post. You'll speak in front of a clerk, not just this man here. Your words will be recorded, carefully, repeated, used." "Used for what?" she asked. "To calm people who sleep near dry timber," he said, "or to justify whatever they decide must come next." The cowboy spoke low, tight. "That sounds less like justice and more like preparation." "Call it what you want," the officer said. "Fear needs a story. We're here to collect one." The official finally snapped, voice cracking with strain. "This is not what I signed up for." "No," the officer replied. "You signed up to carry paper. I signed up to carry consequences." He nodded at the younger soldier. "Get the irons." The woman's breath froze. "You promised record," she said to the official. "Not chains." The official swallowed hard. "Restraints are standard for transport," he began. The cowboy cut in. "She can barely move. You don't need irons." The officer's eyes hardened. "It's not about need. It's about message. When we arrive, people must see order riding in, not doubt." The younger soldier opened a black canvas roll, revealing 2 sets of shackles and a long chain. The sound of metal on wood rang sharp in the cold air. The woman stared at the iron. Memories flashed, not of fantasy, but of stories whispered by elders who had already watched too many wrists bruised blue. "If those close around me," she said slowly, "no one will hear truth from my mouth. Only fear. That may be enough for them," the officer said. The cowboy swung down from his horse in one smooth motion, boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. "Then listen to mine," he said. "I saw the snare. I saw her leg. She was running from something that burned behind her, not toward it." The officer studied him. "Will you swear that under oath?" "I will," the cowboy replied. "Then you ride chained as well," the officer said calmly. A witness bound to his own words. The younger soldier hesitated. "Sir, that's not— It's the cleanest way," the officer snapped. "No one will say we favored one side." He pointed between them. 2 wrists, 2 irons. One story the town can stomach." The wind picked up, flapping the striped cloth above the ravine like a small, tired flag. The official's face went slack. "You can't bind him. He came of his own will." "Exactly," the officer said. "Which makes him more dangerous than anyone forced." The younger soldier stepped forward with the shackles, hand shaking. The cowboy looked up at the woman, then at the iron, then at the ravine walls closing them in. "Decide now," the officer said. "Submit. Or turn this into something the territory will call a revolt." The soldier reached for the cowboy's wrist. And from somewhere beyond the checkpoint, carried faintly on the wind, came the distant rolling echo of many hoofbeats. The sound rolled like thunder trapped under wood, not fast, not reckless, measured, many, and close enough that the ground gave a slow, uneasy shiver. The horses at the checkpoint lifted their heads, ears flicking, muscles tightening, as if instinct remembered something men forgot. The officer's expression froze mid-command. The young soldier lowered the shackles halfway, torn between orders and survival instinct. The cowboy kept his voice low. "That number isn't a patrol," the official whispered. "Miners? Settlers?" The Apache woman shook her head slowly. "No miner rides in silence." The hoofbeats did not carry shouts, no metal clanging, no riders announcing rank or purpose, only steady approach, too steady for fear, too silent for panic, too synchronized for disorder. The officer gestured sharply. "Do not react, do not draw, keep your hands visible." The cowboy spoke under his breath. "That advice goes both ways." The official swallowed, posture rigid, as though his spine were suddenly carved from the very rock around them. "Should we signal?" he asked. "No signal until identity is clear," the officer replied. "Signal wrong. You die first." The Apache woman adjusted her grip on the saddle horn, breath slow, eyes narrowed. She scanned the elevation, saw not the trail. Because in the old ways, danger rarely came from where eyes were expected to look. She locked onto dust plumes forming behind the bend, long before figures emerged. The young soldier whispered, "Sir, we need cover." "No," the officer said. "Cover looks like guilt." The cowboy leaned slightly toward the woman. "If this turns wrong, you drop low to the right. Use the rock shelf for shield." "I won't crawl again," she said quietly. "That's not crawling," he answered. "That's outliving." The hoofbeats entered view, 6 riders, not uniformed, not ragged, not frantic. Their horses were strong but underloaded, not traveling traders, not soldiers, not bounty riders. Their faces were wrapped in scarves against the wind, hats pulled low, clothing plain but purposeful. One carried a long-handled shovel strapped to his saddle. Another, a canvas bundle that looked heavy enough to hold ledgers or tools, but too small for supplies. The third had a coil of new rope. All items that could serve multiple meanings, none benign by context alone. The officer lifted one hand slowly, palm out. "Identify yourselves." No reply, not even a gesture, just forward motion, hooves crunching small stones like teeth cracking bone. The younger soldier whispered, voice unsteady, "Why don't they answer?" The Apache woman answered for them, "Because those who mean to talk announce themselves before they arrive." The riders halted 20 yards away, lined shoulder to shoulder, perfectly still. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the center rider nudged forward. He spoke, voice even, not loud, not threatening, but with a tone that assumed answers would be given, not bargained. "Who holds jurisdiction here?" The officer stepped forward. "I do by written order." The rider tilted his head mildly. "Orders don't always reach the right hands." The cowboy spoke with quiet suspicion. "What paper do you carry?" The rider tapped the canvas bundle. "Words that matter more than ink, written by those who bled." The officer's jaw clenched. "This is a controlled inquiry. Witness is under escort to the post." The rider let the silence stretch long enough to become a second form of pressure. Finally, he said, "You're escorting an injured woman through disputed ground without counsel present. That's not inquiry, that's removal." The young soldier blinked. "Counsel? Which counsel?" The Apache woman's pulse slowed, not from safety, but from recognition of a very different kind of danger. Justice delivered without buildings. The cowboy asked, "You speak for who?" The rider's eyes shifted to the woman, not as prey, not as suspect, but as key. "I speak," he said, "for those whose voices were cut out of the last report." The official looked shaken. "What report?" The rider slid the canvas bundle down, letting it thump softly against his boot. "Names gathered from the ashes," he said, "and questions no one in your post dared write down." The officer's tone sharpened. "There will be no interference." The rider gave the smallest nod, the kind a storm makes before lightning chooses metal. "You misunderstand," he said. "We're not here to interfere." He leaned slightly in his saddle, eyes like flint struck against stone. "We're here to witness your witness." The officer's hand hovered near his holster. State your authority. The rider's reply was slow, controlled, heavy enough to bend the air. Authority is the only thing that can't be carried on paper. The cowboy whispered, "Then what do you carry?" The rider's eyes shifted toward the canvas bundle. "Proof," he said. He nudged his horse forward 3 steps. "And if your record doesn't match it, you won't leave this ravine with ink still dry." The riders remained silent except for the one in front, whose voice carried the weight of someone used to speaking only when stakes justified words. The wind pressed against the ravine walls as if trying to hear the next exchange. The officer finally said, "You claim to bring proof, then speak it plainly." The lead rider shook his head once. "Proof is not spoken. Spoken words are twisted. Proof is shown." The cowboy shifted slightly. "What kind of proof?" "The kind that ink doesn't erase," the rider answered. The woman's gaze tightened on the canvas bundle. She could not see what lay inside, but she recognized the kind of heaviness that came from stories no mouth dared to tell. The official stepped forward, trying to regain structure. "If you have information related to the fire, it should be turned over to the territory directly." "That depends," the rider replied, "on whether the territory seeks truth or closure." The officer crossed his arms. "Same thing." The rider gave him a long, level stare, the kind that made silence louder than argument. "No, closure is when someone is blamed. Truth is when someone is understood." The cowboy quietly murmured, "And which one are you here for?" "Whichever the woman chooses," the rider said. For the first time, all attention shifted to her not as suspect, witness, or burden, but as decision-bearer. She inhaled slowly, voice steady though her leg burned like coals beneath cloth. "What exactly did you bring?" The rider loosened the canvas ties, folding back the top just enough to reveal only edges, no full display. Inside were burnt wooden fragments, a piece of braided horse tack, a scrap of cloth with uniform stitching, and a metal badge backplate warped by heat. The younger soldier whispered, "That looks like—" "Do not assume," the lead rider interrupted. The officer stepped forward, voice tense. "Where did you get those items?" "From the ashes," the rider answered, "from ground that was marked as empty but was not." The official stared at the woman. "You said you saw smoke. Did you see uniforms?" "I saw fire that did not spread the way wild flames do," she said. "I saw it start from 2 sides, not one." The cowboy whispered, "Set, not spread." She nodded once. The officer immediately hardened. "Are you implying this was deliberate?" "I imply nothing," she replied. "I tell what I saw." The rider turned to the officer. "Will you let her testify without chains now?" "That depends on whether she accuses men under the territory," the officer said. The cowboy stepped forward. "You're already assuming the threat is her." "No," the officer replied. "I assume the threat is whoever benefits from confusion." The official, torn between roles, spoke quietly. "Let us hear her, fully, without pressure." The officer frowned. "This isn't council ground." The lead rider lifted his chin slightly. "It is now. You asked for a witness." "A witness cannot speak under fear," the officer countered, voice sharp. "You carry no official authority." "And you," the rider replied, "carry no right to silence those who survived." The wind dropped, not softer, but heavier, the kind of stillness that meant weather was turning. The woman finally spoke. "If I tell it here, it becomes memory. If I tell it at your post, it becomes weapon. If I stay silent, it becomes rumor." The cowboy lowered his voice. "Then where does it become truth?" She looked at the canvas bundle, then at the 3 groups around her, law, rider group, and lone witness. Truth must be spoken where no one owns the ground. The officer's jaw clenched. "There is no such place." "There is," she said, eyes steady. "A burned field holds no flags." The rider nodded slowly. "She understands." The official hesitated. "A burned field is exposed. Anyone could be watching." "Exactly," she said. "Truth should be heard where lies have nowhere to hide." The officer finally spoke, voice low with calculation. "You want us to ride back into the fire site?" "It is the only ground that does not take sides," she answered. The rider closed the canvas carefully. "We already prepared a safe perimeter." the cowboy asked. Safe for who? For truth, the rider said. The officer exhaled sharply. That site is miles out and evening is coming. Darkness hides fear, the woman said, not truth. The officer stared at her for a long moment. Then, if we go there, everything said becomes sworn by circumstance. Yes, she said. And if your story points at someone the territory cannot afford to blame, then the territory must decide what it fears more, she answered. Danger or honesty. The officer turned slowly to his men. Prepare the horses. The younger soldier blinked. So, sir, we go? We go, the officer said. No chains. The cowboy helped the woman adjust in the saddle. The official pulled his coat tighter, as if expecting the night to hold questions sharper than rifles. The rider mounted last and spoke one final line before they moved. No one speaks on the way. The next words are told only where the land remembers. They began riding toward the Burnscar Valley, and as they reached the mouth of the ravine, a single distant light flickered ahead. Not lantern, not campfire, signal. The land changed before the sky did. The soil shifted from brown to dark gray, then to a deep, brittle black that crumbled beneath hooves like burned parchment. The air was heavier here, not with smoke, but with something older, the kind of silence left behind when people don't return to reclaim their breath. No one spoke. The riders, the officer, the official, the cowboy, and the injured woman moved in a slow, single-line descent toward the flat stretch where a cluster of cabins once stood. Only charred outlines remained, rectangles of ash marking where wood frames had fallen inward like tired lungs. A lone clothesline pole leaned sideways, burned rope hanging in stiff black curls. The officer finally broke the silence. This is worse than reported. Reports were written from miles away, the lead rider said softly. The woman's voice emerged quiet but steady. This ground was full of voices. You are hearing only what fire left behind. The cowboy helped her down, letting her weight lean only as much as she allowed. You sure you want to stand here? I must, she said. You do not force truth to walk toward you. You meet it where it fell. The official stepped forward, swallowing hard. How many lived here? No number written can hold them, the woman replied. The officer straightened slightly. We need clarity for record. The woman looked at the ground. Record is why some never got to speak. One of the younger soldiers knelt, touching a piece of timber. It turned to powder under his fingers. He whispered, No one put out the fire. No, the lead rider said, because no one stayed to... The cowboy scanned the area. Where did the flames start? The woman pointed with two fingers, slow and deliberate. There and there. Two opposite corners of the settlement are not one origin, two. The official murmured, Lightning can strike twice, but not like that. The officer's jaw clenched. Then someone said this. Or feared something enough to burn before it was taken, the woman said. The officer took out a small notebook, hesitated, then closed it again. Writing now would feel wrong. Good, the woman said. Truth is not captured by ink before it breathes. The lead rider dismounted and carried the canvas bundle to the center of the burned ground. He placed it carefully upon a charred stone slab, not ceremonially but practically, like evidence laid out on a courtroom table. He unfolded it completely this time. Inside lay a half-charred boot heel with stitching not matching frontier settlers, a small metal insignia plate, scorched beyond clear marking, a fragment of wax-sealed paper, words melted but not erased, and a single iron buckle, too polished to have belonged to the cabins. The officer crouched, studying the items without touching. These don't match the families who lived here. No, the rider said. They match people who left here before fire reached them. The cowboy frowned. Left or were taken? The woman closed her eyes briefly. Some were warned, some were not. The official turned to the officer, voice barely above breath. You think someone cleared witnesses before the fire? I think, the officer answered. Someone wanted this place empty enough to write whatever story they liked, without contradiction. The younger soldier swallowed. Sir, if that's true, then... Careful, the officer warned, eyes sharp. Finish no sentence you don't intend to defend. The woman stepped closer to the ash. Truth is here. You only need to see what survived. The cowboy asked, What survived? She knelt slowly, ignoring the pain, and brushed aside a thin layer of soot. Beneath it lay a thin trail of hardened mud, not ash, a track that had dried before the fire reached it. "Someone left early," she whispered. "Not running, walking." "How do you know it was before the fire?" the officer asked. "If flame touched it, it would crumble like the rest." The lead rider nodded. "She reads what land remembers, not meaning sequence." The officer stood. "Then we need to know who walked out." "Look at direction," the woman said. "They walked toward the north ridge, not toward water, not toward road. That means they expected escort, not rescue." The cowboy stared toward the north path, a narrow cut, nearly invisible unless someone already knew where it led. The officer exhaled slowly. "That ridge leads to old storage cellars." The official blinked. "Abandoned. By paperwork," the officer said, "but not always by purpose." The lead rider closed the canvas. "If answers remain, they are in those cellars." "That ground is fortified," the officer warned. "No civilian should enter," the cowboy replied. "Then it's a good thing we didn't come as civilians." The woman looked at each man, eyes steady as cooled steel. "Before we walk further, I must say something." Everyone stopped. "No matter what is found," she said, "do not ask me to carry blame just because my people carried silence." The officer answered slowly, not soft, not harsh. "Truth will decide weight, not rumor." The lead rider mounted. "Then we ride to the north ridge." The soldier's voice shook. "And what if someone's waiting there?" The woman spoke first, steady as winter ground. "Then we learn if the fire was meant to erase people, or to erase witnesses." They turned their horses north. Halfway up the ridge, a dull metallic sound echoed below. Something locked, something underground, and recently moved. They reached the north ridge as daylight flattened into a pale, pewter dusk, the hour when shadows lengthened faster than footsteps. The burned settlement lay behind them like a charcoal memory. Ahead, the ridge sloped toward a narrow cut in the hillside, half hidden by brush and old timber beams blackened by time, not fire. The metallic sound came again, faint, hollow, like iron latching against stone. The officer raised his hand, halting everyone. The lead rider spoke quietly. "That came from below." The official swallowed. "Cellars are sealed. They were sealed years ago." "Sealed doors don't make new sounds," the cowboy said. The Apache woman steadied herself, planting her good foot carefully. "Listen first, move second." They waited, no wind, no animals. Then a single drag of metal, like someone sliding a latch back into place. The young soldier looked to the officer. "Sir, someone's alive." The officer didn't answer. Survival wasn't guaranteed. Sound did not always mean life. The lead rider dismounted and scanned the slope. "There," he said, half buried beneath loose earth, a stone slab with an iron ring, almost flush with the ground. The cowboy leaned in. "That's not storage." "That's reinforcement," the official whispered. "Who would hide an entrance like that?" The officer's voice came low. "Someone who didn't want anyone to find it." The woman crouched and brushed soil away, careful, not intrusive. The ring was scratched, not rusted, touched recently. She looked up at the officer. "Open it." The officer hesitated. "If there's someone inside, then they're waiting," she said. "And they know we're here." The cowboy put a hand to the ring, testing weight. "It's heavy, but not locked." The lead rider stepped forward. "Open on 3. No one draw unless I say." The count was silent, only lips moving. On 3, the cowboy pulled. The slab lifted with a dry groan, hinges straining like old bones refusing to wake. A cold rush of air escaped, not foul but stale, like breath trapped too long. A ladder descended into darkness. Not rotted wood, fitted oak with iron brackets. Someone had built this to last. The officer whispered, barely audible, "This wasn't for grain." The woman spoke softly. "Look." Scratched into the inner stone frame were marks, not letters, tally lines, grouped in sets, some deep, some faint, some very, very recent. The young soldier's voice trembled. "Days," the woman answered. "Days," and he counted by someone who could not see the sun. The officer lit a slow match and lowered it. The flame drew a faint glow on the walls below, revealing a small underground room. and a metal lockbox on a table built from old wagon boards. No bodies, no sound, no movement. But in the corner, on a cot of burlap and straw, a coat lay folded with care, unburned, unsoiled, and marked with territorial stitching identical to the insignia fragment in the canvas bundle. The lead rider exhaled. Someone knew the fire was coming. The official stepped back, shaken. "You think they escaped, hid, or abandoned the others?" The woman placed a hand gently on the stone frame, not touching the marks, only feeling the cold. "Ask the box," she said. "That kind of iron does not hold food or clothes." The officer climbed halfway down the ladder. "If this has documents, this becomes evidence." The lead rider answered, "Then open it where all can see." The officer paused at the bottom step. "It's locked." The cowboy leaned over the opening. "Then we need a key." The woman, voice steady, said, "No, keys keep secrets." "Break it." The officer hesitated. Breaking it meant no chain of custody, no official seal, no preserved formality. The lead rider spoke with quiet finality. "Use truth as permission." The officer struck the latch with the butt of his pistol, once, twice, until the lock snapped. He lifted the lid. Inside lay bundled papers, edges curled from heat but not consumed, and one small envelope, bound with twine. The cowboy called down softly, "What's written?" The officer didn't answer immediately. His shoulders stiffened. His breath changed. The woman asked, "Tell us." Slowly, he raised his eyes toward them. "It's a advance notice," he said. "Notice of what?" the official whispered. The officer read the top line aloud, voice hollow. "Scheduled clearance. Inhabitants to be removed prior to land reassignment." A silence heavier than stone fell. Then he read the next line, and his voice faltered. "Method. Fire ordered only if evacuation fails by designated date." The young soldier's face drained of color. "Sir, that means—" But before anyone could speak another word, a shadow moved behind them on the ridge, a silhouette against the dying sky, watching. No sound, no greeting, just presence. The cowboy felt it first, that prickle at the back of the neck that comes when the air shifts around a presence not yet announced. He turned his head slowly, not jerking, not calling out. On the ridge above, where the last strip of sky bled into evening, a figure stood against the fading light. No uniform, no shining badge, just a long coat, hat brim low, and a rifle resting easy in the crook of one arm. The lead rider looked up next. "Don't move too fast," he murmured. "Every sudden gesture looks like guilt from a distance." The officer climbed back up the ladder, papers still in his hand, his jaw tight. "We're being watched," he said unnecessarily. The Apache woman steadied herself against the stone, ankle throbbing from the descent and the weight of what had been read. Her gaze narrowed, not in fear, but in assessment. "Is he alone?" the young soldier whispered. "No one stands that calm if he's alone," she replied. The figure on the ridge remained still, almost carved into the horizon. Then, slowly, he raised his free hand, not in greeting, not in surrender. He pointed directly at the officer. The officer stiffened. "He wants me." The cowboy shifted slightly closer to the woman, a quiet act of positioning, not to hide her, but to place himself between her and an unknown rifle. The lead rider cupped his hands around his mouth, voice steady but not loud. "State your name and purpose." The figure did not answer. Instead, another shape emerged beside him, shorter, hunched slightly, carrying what looked like a ledger or book pressed against the chest. The second figure leaned toward the first, spoke something too quiet to reach the ridge below, then pulled a strip of cloth from a pocket and tied it to a broken branch, much like the one they'd seen at the ravine. "Signal." Repeated. The official swallowed audibly. "Another warning." The cowboy shook his head. "Signals aren't warnings. They're agreements. To someone." The officer looked at the papers in his hand, then up at the ridge. "They know what's down in this box." The woman's voice cut quietly through the tension. "Or they know what's missing from theirs." The lead rider stepped forward, making himself visible, arms spread to show he held no weapon. "If you're here for the record," he called, "come down and hear it from the ground that burned." The figure with the ledger shifted, as if tempted. The tall one with the rifle shook his head once. "I don't like this," the younger soldier muttered. The cowboy answered, "You don't have to like it, you just have to see it." The tall figure finally called back, voice rough, carrying just enough to reach them. "That paper," he said, nodding toward the officer's hand, "was never meant to touch this soil." The officer raised it slightly, and yet it did. "We found it where fire was used as ink." The man on the ridge replied, "Put it back, close the lid, walk away. That's the only way anyone leaves this hill breathing easy." The official's eyes widened. "You're giving orders now? Under whose authority?" The second figure spoke up, voice softer, careful. "Under the authority of those who will be blamed if that notice reaches town." The woman's eyes sharpened. "You talk like men who wrote from warm rooms," she said, "not like those who buried their dead with cold hands." The tall man shifted his rifle, still not raising it. "You think public grief is heavy," he called. "Try public rage when they learn whose ink drew those lines." The lead rider's tone chilled. "So your answer is to bury truth a second time?" "Our answer," the man replied, "is to keep this valley from becoming a spark that lights 10 more. The cowboy called back, "By hiding what happened here. By choosing which fire burns worst," the man said. "One blaze in the hills, or a blaze in every street when people turn on each other with no understanding." The officer's hand tightened around the papers. "That's not your choice to make." The man's answer came quick. "It became my choice when I watched men sign orders with one hand, then shake other hands in town and pretend they knew nothing." The young soldier's voice cracked. "Sir, is he saying—" The officer cut him off with a small gesture. His eyes never left the ridge. "Who are you?" he demanded. The tall man's jaw tightened. "Someone who wrote his name at the bottom of those orders and now knows what that ink truly bought." The official whispered, stunned. You're from the office?" "Not anymore," the man said. "I resigned the moment I saw the first smoke column, but resignation doesn't erase signatures." The woman studied him with a hard, level gaze. "You came back," she said. "Why?" He hesitated, and in that brief silence, the truth slipped through. "To see if anyone survived what we decided on paper," he admitted. The lead rider's voice darkened. "And instead of helping, you stand there telling us to shut the lid." "I'm telling you," the man replied. "Once that notice leaves this valley, someone will need a scapegoat. And no one with power will pick up a mirror when they can point at a stranger instead." His eyes shifted, just for a heartbeat, toward the woman. The cowboy called out, low and firm, "Then you came here hoping to stop that, or to choose who wears the blame?" The man's silence was answer enough. The woman spoke into the quiet. "Burned houses do not ask who started the fire. They ask who left them to it." The shorter figure at his side clutched the ledger tighter. "We kept copies," they said, "of everything, including who refused to sign and who didn't hesitate." The lead rider's eyes narrowed. "And you think hiding those copies here will keep everyone safe?" "No," the ledger holder replied. "But I think revealing them without care will get more people killed than the fire already did." The officer looked from the lockbox to the ridge, torn between written duty and the weight of what he'd read. The cowboy spoke quietly to him. "You know now this wasn't just some accident or stray spark. That makes you responsible for what happens next." "And it makes him responsible for what happened before," the lead rider added, nodding to the man on the ridge. The woman looked around at all of them, law, riders, clerk, witness, and the architect of the orders silhouetted above. "You all carry part of this fire," she said. "Some lit it, some watched it, some walked past it. None are clean." The man on the ridge let out a long, exhausted breath. "That's exactly why this can't reach town as it is." The officer finally asked the question hanging in the air, "And what do you intend to do?" "To stop it." The man adjusted his rifle at last, not shouldering it to fire, but holding it in both hands with a kind of grim decision. "Whatever is needed," he said, "to make sure the only story that leaves this valley die is the one people can live with." He started down the slope, and for the first time that day, the cowboy sensed that the real battle wouldn't be over who set the fire, but over who would be allowed to tell its story. The man reached the halfway point of the slope before any of them moved. Gravel shifted beneath his boots, not hurried, not hesitant, the walk of someone who had already rehearsed this moment alone in too many sleepless hours. When he finally stepped into full view, the officer recognized him. The uniform coat was gone, but the bearing remained, chin level, back straight, eyes that carried both authority and regret. The officer said quietly, "You're Ward." The man stopped. "I was." The cowboy narrowed his eyes. "So you're the one who signed it," Ward exhaled. "I signed a draft, not a sentence. There was supposed to be relocation first. The fire was a contingency, not a starting point." The lead rider stepped forward. "Documents don't care which line was intended first. They only care about which one was easier to carry out." Ward's jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that now?" The woman studied him, not his hands, nor his weapon, but the way he breathed. "You came back to this place because the fire didn't stop burning inside you." Ward blinked, taken off guard by her words. She continued, steady. "If you wanted only to bury the truth, you would not have returned to the ground that remembers." Ward didn't deny it. "For 26 nights, he said, I saw this place every time I closed my eyes, every time I woke up. I needed to see if someone made it out." "You saw," the cowboy said. "Now what?" Ward shifted his rifle, not as threat but as symbol, authority without badge, burden without title. "The question now," he said slowly, "is what version of this truth lets the most people live with themselves?" The officer stepped forward. "No version protects everyone. That's past possible." Ward met his gaze. "Then the next best outcome is preventing a war of blame." The woman's voice cut through like a clear bell struck once in cold air. "Truth is not war unless people fear it more than lies." Ward turned to her. "If this information spreads without guidance, people will tear each other apart trying to decide who deserves punishment. Those who planned it, those who obeyed it, those who didn't warn loudly enough, maybe even those who survived it." The lead rider replied, "Justice is not destruction." "And neither is silence," Ward countered. The officer held up the documents. "These speak plainly." "No," Ward said, stepping closer. "These speak dangerously simple." The young soldier swallowed hard. "Sir, what are you proposing?" Ward looked at the papers, not with fear, but with sorrow. "A third version," he said. "A statement that acknowledges loss and without naming a single target for vengeance." The cowboy shook his head. "That's not truth. That's weatherproof history." Ward's voice was tired, not defensive, haunted. "If truth kills more people than the fire did, then what have we protected?" The ridge wind picked up, stirring ash like black snow around their boots. The woman stepped forward, ignoring pain. "Truth must remain whole," she said. "But whole truth does not have to be thrown like a stone." Ward stared at her, the one voice he could not dismiss. "So what do you suggest?" She looked around at each of them in turn, weighing not only their roles but their hearts. "3 voices," she said. "One who saw the fire, one who read the orders, one who questioned them. Together, they speak one account. No heroes, no villains, only choices." The lead rider nodded slowly. "Shared truth cannot be weaponized." The officer closed the lockbox. "And a truth spoken by more than one cannot be twisted." The cowboy quietly asked, "What about the ones who want someone to blame?" The woman looked to the horizon where the stars were emerging one by one. "Blame does not rebuild. Memory does." Ward lowered his rifle, finally, the metal touching the ash-covered ground. For the first time since he appeared, his voice carried hope, not defense. "If we're doing this together and then we decide how—" The officer tucked the documents inside his coat. "Not out here, not under threats. We take this to a neutral place." The woman nodded. "A place where no one owns the ground." The cowboy turned, scanning north. "There's a way station about an hour's ride, empty but intact," Ward agreed. "No signs, no flags, just walls." The lead rider gathered the horses. "Then we ride." As they mounted, Ward added one last condition, voice firm, but no longer hard. "No story leaves that building until every voice inside agrees on a single truth." The woman answered with quiet resolve, "Then choose your words with clean hands." They rode out together, not as enemies, not yet as allies, but as the only people who could decide what history would say. And high above, on the ridge they left behind, a second signal cloth fluttered quietly in the gathering night, unanswered, but seen. The way station stood where two old trade routes once met, long abandoned after a river crossing farther west made it unnecessary. Its walls were weathered but upright, its roof patched with mismatched boards, a structure that was neither home nor headquarters, perfect for what they needed, a room that belonged to no one. They dismounted in silence, not the silence of fear, the silence of men and women who understood that words spoken here might outlive them all. Inside, dust floated like pale threads in the lantern light. A table stood near the center, scarred by knives and ink bottles from decades past. The officer placed the lockbox on it, next to Ward's ledger and the rider's canvas bundle. "Before we begin," the official said, "we must decide what rules govern this." Ward leaned against the wall, not hiding his exhaustion. No threats, no bargaining, no accusations stated as fact. The lead rider added, "And no voice dismissed because it's uncomfortable." The cowboy looked to the woman, "And no one speaks for someone else." She nodded and took a slow, steady breath, leaning against a chair for balance. "Truth has three parts," she said. "What happened? What was intended? What can still be done?" The officer sat, pen ready but not yet moving. "Then we start with what happened." Ward paced once, then stopped. "I will speak to intention first, because a fire ordered as last resort became someone's first action, and I will not let bureaucratic wording hide behind sequence." The cowboy folded his arms. "So you admit the order existed?" "I admit I signed a clearance plan that included fire if evacuation failed," Ward said, voice steady. "I admit it was reckless to include at all, and I admit it wasn't halted fast enough when people here hadn't even been properly informed." The officer looked up. "And why weren't they told?" Ward swallowed. "Because the men delivering notices were redirected before the job was finished. They were told the settlement was already empty." The lead rider's jaw flexed. "Someone lied upward, or assumed upward," Ward replied. "That distinction matters only to those who still sleep soundly." The woman finally spoke. "People died because someone decided probably empty was close enough to truth." No one argued. The officer turned to her. "Your testimony. Tell what you saw." She closed her eyes once, not to dramatize, to order memory. "I saw smoke lines before flame," she said. "I saw men moving away, not toward. I saw no panic, only hurrying." "Hurrying where?" the cowboy asked. "Toward the ridge," she replied. Ward's eyes flicked to the officer. "That matches the Cellar theory." The lead rider leaned forward. "And you saw no uniforms?" "I saw coats with matching cut and stitching," she said, "but not the insignia because it was night. I speak only what eyes swore, not what mind suspects." The officer nodded with respect, a gesture earned. Then the cowboy said quietly, "That leads to the last part. What can still be done?" Ward set his rifle aside entirely. "We write one account, not a legend, not a pardon. A full account, bearing shared responsibility." The officer dipped his pen. "Then speak the agreed statement, line by line." The woman stepped closer to the table. "First line, a fire took this settlement and lives were lost. No softening." "All agreed," the cowboy said. Ward nodded slowly. "Yes." Second line, the lead rider offered, "The fire was connected to an official clearance plan that was not fully communicated." The officer hesitated, then wrote, "All agreed." Ward exhaled. "Yes." Third line, the official said, voice steadying, "The sequence of events included error, assumption, and failure of duty, not enemy action." All eyes shifted to the woman. After a long silence, she answered, "Yes." Ward pointed to the papers. "One more line must exist." The officer looked up. "What line?" Ward spoke with the weight of someone ready to be judged. "Responsibility belongs not to one, but to every hand that signed, delivered, delayed, or doubted." The cowboy stared at him. "You're willing to stand behind that?" Ward looked around the room, at the ash-covered memory behind them and the unwritten future ahead. "Yes," he said. The officer sealed the final sentence. "The names of the lost will be recorded before the names of the responsible." The woman placed her hand atop the paper, not to swear, but to acknowledge. Then, just as the officer began blowing the ink dry, a faint knock sounded at the far door. Not frantic, not hostile. Just 3 slow, deliberate taps. Ward froze. "No one else was supposed to know this place," the woman whispered. "Truth called more than us." The lead rider reached for the lantern, lifting it toward the door. The knock came again, the same 3 taps, measured and patient. The 3 soft knocks echoed again, closer now in the quiet waystation room, vibrating through the lantern light as if they touched not wood but nerve. Ward whispered, "If someone followed us, they knew the purpose, not just the place." The officer motioned everyone still, then checked the latch. His brow furrowed. "It's not locked." The cowboy straightened. "We never slid the bolt." The woman's voice was calm but not careless. "A truth room with a locked door becomes a cell." The lead rider lifted the lantern toward the hinges. "Get ready." Whoever stands there came for an answer. The officer pulled the door open slowly. Not flung, not invited. A single person stood outside. A young woman, soot still in the creases of her clothes, boots half burned, hair singed at the ends only as fire kisses someone who ran through smoke, not flames. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Her eyes were red not from crying, but from enduring. She looked at each face without bowing her head. "I lived there," she said, voice raw. "I was in that cellar. I kept count. I waited. I listened. I heard you reading from that box." No one spoke. She stepped inside, gripping the back of a chair as if the wood was the only unburned anchor left in her world. "You're writing a story," she said, "about what happened, about why, about who's responsible." Ward swallowed hard. "We're trying to speak truth in a way that prevents more loss." She stared directly at him. "You wrote the paper that started it." He didn't hide. "I did, and I am here to face that." She turned to the officer. "And you enforce the laws that followed it." He nodded. "I do, and I commit to recording truth, not burying it." Then she faced the Apache woman, slowly, with a kind of aching recognition. "You saw the flames, you saw the running, you saw what wasn't supposed to be seen." The woman met her gaze with quiet dignity. "Yes." The survivor's voice trembled only once, then steadied. "Then I am the one who speaks what happened below ground." Everyone listened, truly listened. She drew a breath that seemed to pull the night through her lungs. When the smoke came, some fled, some froze, some tried to break the door. But one man, one in a coat like yours, she said, eyes flicking briefly toward, told us to go down there. He said it was safer than running. He said someone would come back. She paused, not for effect, but because her throat burned with memory. He locked the door from outside so we wouldn't run into the fire. He told us it was temporary, until help came, and he ran back uphill toward the ridge. The cowboy whispered, "He tried to save them, by sealing them in." She nodded, tears finally gathering but not falling. "Yes, some lived because of that choice. Some died because of oxygen running low. He couldn't open it again, or maybe he didn't return. I don't know." Ward lowered his head, not collapsing, but accepting weight placed exactly where it belonged. The survivor continued, voice stern with truth. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a villain. He made a choice in the smoke between 2 horrors, and he picked the one he could touch. Silence held. The survivor stepped to the table, placed one hand on the written statement. "You want to know the real truth." Everyone braced. There was no single cause, no single monster, no single savior. There was fear, confusion, delay, orders, assumptions, and hope that came too late. She looked at all of them in turn. "If you write a story that names one enemy, you create a fire bigger than the one that already took my home." Her final words became the fulcrum of the entire narrative. Write it so that no one forgets, but also so no one repeats it. Ward wiped his eyes once, not to hide tears, but to see clearly. The officer lifted his pen, but didn't write yet. The Apache woman placed her injured hand over the survivor's. "We will tell it complete." The lead rider nodded. "No flames of anger, no blanket of silence." The cowboy added, "No names erased, no names used as weapons." Ward whispered, and no truth spoken alone. The survivor released a breath that sounded like the first fresh air she'd taken since the fire. "You're ready," she said. They all sat. The officer put pen to paper. Ward placed his hand beside hers. The Apache woman touched the edge of the page. The lead writer nodded once. The cowboy leaned in. 6 breaths became a single promise, and with the first stroke of ink, the climax resolved not with who could win, but with who would choose to be human. If this story moved you, don't just scroll, stay with us. There are more forgotten voices, untold truths, and hidden roads waiting to be uncovered. Every week, we bring you powerful frontier stories about resilience, choices, and the cost of silence. Tap subscribe so you never miss the next chapter, and turn on notifications so you're here when the next fire is lit. Drop a comment with one word that stayed with you tonight: truth, choice, survival, or your own. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, share this video with someone who values honesty over headlines. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Ride with us.